Welcome to the Business Information Buffet Podcast, also known as the BIB Podcast, where everybody eats, powered by the College of Southern Nevada. Each week, we'll be featuring business owners and entrepreneurs that will provide their personal recipes for business, powerful conversations, and knowledge of the business world. We amplify the stories of various backgrounds, cultures, and expertise. Our self-identity is as diverse as our social community. We cultivate a community of like-minded individuals that share their different perspectives, broadening our worldview. Are you ready? This is the BIB Podcast, where everybody eats.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready?
Welcome back to the Business Information Buffet Podcast, also known as the BIB Podcast, where everybody eats, under the operation of the College of Southern Nevada, here at the North Las Vegas campus for another exciting episode. I am your host, Sean Tory, with our guest host,
Patranya Bhoolsuwan.
So we brought her back, ladies and gentlemen. She's back to actually lead us for, this is Asian Pacific Honors Month, okay? Like, yes. Come on, like this is our first episode, and we're actually doing it a week early because we have a great event that's coming up. But she's gonna be the lead today, and you're gonna see me in the background for the first time, ladies and gentlemen. But no, I'll pop in so quick, but I'm gonna pass this off right over to Patranya.
Thank you so much, Sean. So great to be back.
It is great to be. I'm happy to see you, actually. Yeah. I really am happy.
We had a great episode. We talked about my business and what we do. So thank you so much for that. And I'm so happy to be back here, especially for Asian Pacific Heritage Month, to emphasize and focus a guy who's really been instrumental for the success of so many people.
Right.
So it's so great to be here. Thank you so much, Sean. And we're here with Bryan Pham today. He's one of the founders of Asian Hustle Network. Bryan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you too for having me here. I'm super excited.
This is so great to have you because you're here. He's actually, Sean, a relatively new Las Vegas resident.
Okay.
And now he's starting something really special here. So we're going to talk about his network and this special event that's coming up soon.
Man, I'm looking forward to it. Let's talk about it. Let's dive in.
Yeah, so let's start with this Asian Hustle Network. I think that, what's really special, I never told you this, Bryan. I met him recently, but you started November 2019. That's actually when I started Patranya Media LLC. Wow. So we have that synergy going. We're meant to meet. So we started our own venture at the same time, but you have really grown this network. So talk to us about it. Someone who's never heard of Asian Hustle Network, what is this all about?
Yeah, so right now, as we're recording, we are about 200,000 members worldwide.
Wow. Good for you. Wow. Yeah. And it started with you and your partner, right? Came up with this idea.
Actually, it started probably like a couple years before the actual launch date, right? Because we kept wondering, like, does the community need something like this? Like, should we do this? It was like a lot of mental barriers to overcome because I think at that time, I wasn't too comfortable putting myself in the public and being a public speaker. And having people stalk my social media accounts all the way back a couple of years to see who I am.
Right.
But luckily for them and myself, I'm a very consistent, boring person. Whereas there's nothing that I said a couple of years ago that doesn't match with what I'm doing now. Right. But then it took me a while to like put those words into action because I need to grow personally. I was scared. Right. I was scared because the Asian community, if you guys don't know, is very fragmented. We're rooted in being competitive against each other. Like we have a lot of crab mentality in the community where it's like if someone succeeds, we have an urge to pull them down.
Right.
What are you doing? How can you do that? No, stay with us. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that mentality. It just stems from a place of war and scarcity. Because a lot of our parents escaped like the wars over Asia, seeking America for a better life. Right. And resources back then were very limited. Whereas one family gets food where the other one doesn't. And that is transferred to our generation. But we live in a completely different generation now where we have more abundance.
Right.
And we need to think that way. And prior to Asian Hustle Network, I was searching for a community like this. Because I was always wondering, why are we against each other? Right.
So the goal of AHN, and you go by ON, right? Or AHN, how do you say this?
I say both.
Both, yeah. Asian Hustle Network. And when I first saw it online, I was like, whoa, what is this? Because that's when I was starting this peg, moving, when I talked to Sean about me moving from my journalism world into entrepreneurial, the word hustle is that trigger word, right? You just, you're a hustler. You have to hustle to get your business. So when I saw that online, Asian Hustle Network, that caught my attention. I was like, what is this all about? And I started looking into all the different stories that were being showcased there. People coming together, going through challenges, getting advice. And this is basically kind of the platform where you gave opportunities and still continue to do that for people to share your story, because that, you said, is the way of bringing people together.
That's absolutely right? Because storytelling is so powerful, but a lot of us don't take the opportunity to ask those questions. What is your story? Because once you hear each other's story, our backgrounds and upbringing, morals and values are all very similar. We put aside our differences and be like, yo, we need to stick together. That's how we're going to make a difference. Right?
Yeah. And it's just so exciting to have you here now and your partner Maggie, right? And you're both kind of working to expand this network, not just here, not just across the country, but around the world. So we're going to talk about this conference that's coming up in Las Vegas in just a little bit. But, for people to get to know your story a little bit, Bryan, because I know, you said that you were kind of uncomfortable to put it out there, but I think part of the story that makes Asian Hustle Network so appealing is your personal background story. So tell us a little bit about that, because were you born in the U.S.?
I was born in the U.S., but it was kind of interesting because I was born in the U.S., but all my cousins were not. So as a result,
wow,
I started school in like ESL classes in elementary, and people kept asking me, "Where are you from?" I was like, "I was born in LA."
But you spoke your native language as a kid, right?
Wow. I did.
Yeah, Vietnamese.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So do you still like it? Does speaking the Vietnamese language, is there a slight difference being an adult doing it now, or is it still like?
There's a lot more pride now.
Well, okay,
right. Yeah. Whereas before, it's like I'm like, wait a minute, I was born here. Why am I in ESL classes? So I took a great shame to that. I just remember in 6th grade, it's like I would like wait until the very last minute before I was tardy to walk to class, and no one knew I was in the ESL classes.
Yeah.
Right. But then like I learned a lot from that experience too, of like how people view themselves, their identity and everything. Because of them, I had a lot more international friends than the average person.
Oh, wow.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your family a little bit, what they did and where you grew up and how that inspired you to do what you do now.
Yeah. So my parents escaped the Vietnam War. Came to America, and the famous story that they had was we had $20 this month. We had to stretch it out the entire month.
Wow.
And my mom was telling me how she did it. She bought tea, she bought ramen, she bought eggs, and she was like...
And for the family of how many people?
This is at the time we had 4 people to the family.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And that's like their immigrant story. And they're telling me stories about when my dad was like, he didn't know what to do in his life because he came over here, doesn't know the language. He put himself to trade school while carrying my sister to his classes every day, right? And praying that she doesn't cry while still doing homework.
Wow.
Right? And that's like their immigrant story of pushing forward. So they created a lot better life for us. But even so, like growing up was very limited. And they make sure that we didn't know very limited, right? There's certain things where it's like, you think back about it, it's like, whoa, we lived in a 2-bedroom, 600 square foot place in LA between 5 people. My younger brother was now born. Right. And for the longest time, I was wondering why my parents wouldn't let me have friends over to our house, because they didn't want us to feel like we're lesser than anyone else. But at the same time, they didn't let me stay at anyone else's house neither. So I had this impression that everyone else stayed in like a 600 square foot house, or like sleeping over their siblings growing up. Right. It wasn't until I got to college that I totally blew my mind. Like what is out there? Wow, there's so much abundance. So I had to take a lot of time to like process everything, to like digest everything, to be like, all right, how can I build a better life for myself? So I started my own hustle journey. I graduated college a little bit shy of 20. So I graduated super early. And I graduated during a time of recession. Where it was it's extremely hard to find a job. So I was questioning everything. And that's where like the word hustle resonates so much to me, because I'm like, I need to go out there and hustle more and do more, because I can only believe in myself.
Yeah. And that was kind of the success. You have to hustle, right?
Yeah.
And so what was your first job out of college?
Oh man, I worked a lot of random jobs. I worked at a bookstore because I couldn't find an actual job. And then I interviewed around for like insurance places. And then finally I found a job within my major, which is computer science. So I ended up working at Medtronic and Boeing.
And that was in California?
This was in California. Yeah. So that really got me into the world of tech. And that kind of leads me down the path of the Asian Hustle Network. Because as I was putting in lots of hours, I realized that not only for myself, but my other non-Asian, like for my other Asian coworkers, we were getting passed up for our promotion. We're putting like hundreds of hours into the company and our work and everything. And at the time, I never really questioned anything because I'm just like, yeah, maybe I didn't have leadership abilities because I always considered myself kind of young. But that's the main critique that came out over and over. Like we see you.
You don't promote your own self, right?
We see you as an individual contributor, not a manager. And at first, I'm like, maybe that's just me. So I went out there and I tried to like improve my abilities by having even more side hustles. Eventually, I was running a full-on business while having a job.
Wow.
Right, and I'm like, they're still telling me this when I'm like managing like and making my salary on top of my salary on the side, and not even telling them about this, right? And I'm like, okay, so I started questioning everything. And the joke, so I moved to San Francisco for a little bit, and the joke was like, oh yeah, San Francisco is getting really white.
Oh wow!
Right, and I'm just like, okay, so I started talking to my coworkers, and now I stumble upon this new concept called the bamboo ceiling. That blew my mind. So you guys don't know what the bamboo ceiling is. The bamboo ceiling is essentially, there's a ceiling at work where you don't get promoted because Asians are seen as hardworking. They don't question things. They don't push back. They just accept things how they are.
You're talking about the tech world, which is really interesting because in the news world, there's that bamboo ceiling. We never really talked about it or describe it in that way.
Right.
But as an Asian American woman, they always see you, oh, she's the weekend anchor, not the main anchor.
Oh,
you know, there was that kind of invisible line, just like, okay, because people see a lot of Asian Americans in reporter or weekend anchor, but as a main anchor, are they good enough for it? And then if you don't see those people in that role, then you're like, no, then maybe I'm only meant to be a weekend anchor. You know, it's really interesting because it's not just in the tech world, right? We create that kind of ceiling for ourselves.
So is that something just for both industries, right? This somewhat same line that's bit. Is that something that has been hard to combat and get over, like in these industries?
I think it's still there in some ways, right? It's getting better. I think I'm seeing more Asian American female main anchors out there and male. You know, it's not just female, actually, male anchors as well. But I feel like like you said, we have to kind of get over it in ourselves too, right? Seeing ourselves in that way that we can be. We do have the skills and we do have that ability, but we need to make people see us in that light.
Yeah, and that's where we really have to come together, right? Because I feel like we have to support each other, but that's also missing our community, right? Because it's very like psychological, right? You want to support and mentor people that look like you and sound like you.
Of course.
But if the leaders aren't there and don't look like you and sound like you, they're going to overlook you.
Yep.
Man.
Right?
I got to applaud that because that's something I often talk about all the time as far as representation. It's hard. Like when people are like, oh, representation, you don't need no, you do need representation so that there's a correlation or folks can understand. Like if we've never seen it, it's hard sometimes to see outside of like what we haven't been able to experience.
Yeah.
And if you're the first one, there's a lot of pressure too.
Right.
Yeah.
So Asian Hustle Network, I mean, that's part of what you do. The core is bring all these stories together. And then what you're doing here in Las Vegas coming up, talk to us about that conference because this is kind of the pinnacle of what you've been working on for so many years.
Yeah. It's super excited to be here in Las Vegas, by the way. I think the city is amazing, super diverse.
Yeah.
Awesome to be here. I think a lot of people are now discovering Las Vegas. So you're seeing real estate prices go through the roof, right?
That's kind of the bad part. Sean knows it well.
I know it very well.
Yeah. So Vegas has always been something I always wanted to do since day one, right? Every time for the first time we host our event in San Francisco and LA, so we're at an event like number 8 or number 9 now across the world.
Congrats.
Right?
Come on now. Yes.
That's awesome.
And we always mentioned that we wanted to come to Las Vegas. Why? Because Las Vegas can support the vision that we have, right? We want to bring eventually hundreds of thousands of people to our conference for one reason, to support each other. And I don't want to be just unique towards the Asian community. I want it to be allyship across other communities as well. Time and time again, people always ask me, do I have to be Asian to attend this conference? No. The answer is no. I want people to come to appreciate that we can all work together. That at the end of the day, we all want the same things, right?
I agree.
You know, and the name of this conference, so it's called the Uplifted Conference, happening April 28, 29, and at the Industrial Event Center, right?
That's correct.
Right here in Las Vegas. And what's really great about it, because you're bringing people not just around Nevada, but all over the country and around the world coming together. So talk to us about what's going to be happening when people get there. 2 days, 2 full days.
Right.
2 full days.
Yeah.
So we have a lineup of all-star keynote speakers. We have the founder of Panda Express, Lena Dong. She has 17 million followers on TikTok.
Wow.
Drex Lee, Miko Masamura just raised $100 million fund like last week. We're still missing one more keynote speaker, but like, you know, this is like crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
And you're bringing people here to be inspired, it sounds, right? You want people to kind of learn from all these speakers and where they can kind of visualize and see themselves, right?
Yeah. And it's crazy because like when we planned this conference to be in Las Vegas, we're hoping to look at other Asian conferences as inspiration, especially Asian American conferences.
Right.
To our surprise, they don't really exist.
Really?
But if they do exist, most of the speakers on stage are non-Asian. And that falls back into the trap of representation. Right. And I'm not trying to put any other org down. I'm just saying what I see.
Right.
So I wanted this experience to be, you know, for our community, from our community, for our community. Right. And show that there are leaders in key positions. And I realized that talking to a lot of, you know, founders, so there's a lot of founders out there who are Asian, but because there are cultural differences, we're always taught to not stand out. Right.
Wow.
And I talked to these founders and a lot of them tell me that I wish I was more loud. I wish I spoke up more. I wish I created better representation.
Right.
But I too also faced that issue. My mom used to tell me, no matter how, like in the future, when you become really successful, shut up.
Stay humble, right?
Humble, yeah,
that's the
humility.
Asian thing. It's like just work hard but stay humble. You don't have to talk about it. People will notice. But I've learned, I don't know, maybe you'll agree with me. When I was a journalist with another story, but when I started my own business, if you don't talk about what you do or who you are, no one's going to know. No one's going to know what you do. So yes, there's that line where I'm like, oh, I don't want to brag. But at the same time, if I don't brag or say something about what I do, who's going to know about it?
Exactly.
Right?
And that's the name of the game today, right? It's because you have to continuously market yourself, especially as an entrepreneur, in order to make a difference and get business and get traction to do all these things. Yeah. But it goes so much against our cultural upbringing where
it's so interesting, right? And now, Sean, I mean, just seeing kind of Asians kind of coming up now, but I think it's a new generation of us being more willing and being more kind of vibrant about telling our stories. When our former generation, we work hard, but we don't say anything about it because that's part of the culture.
It is.
I'm sitting back taking this in because I know for someone who's African American, who's black, we like growing up around my Asian friends. It was like one of those things where I'm like, man, he's dope. He don't talk about it. Like, but we never we knew like, okay, that's something they're very prideful of is humility and just keep grinding. And it's one of those things that a lot of us respected because we're just like, man, they tell us to be humble too. Well, we were like, forget that. We're like, forget that. So I salute you both. Like seriously.
Thank you.
Man, that's something that I'm like, wow, I'm just amazed right now.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a blend, right? I think we all learn from each other too, because you can't just market yourself all the time without any action, but you can't have action all the time without speaking about what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about putting in, I think, success that I've seen now, people who, you know, like Bryan, like Sean, people who, you know, be able to market themselves well, but at the same time, they got to do the work. If you don't do the work, you're not going to get to where you go.
You said that on your episode too.
Yeah.
You talk about people doing the work.
Yeah. And people don't see that, right? They don't see all the work that led up to when you're like, okay, here I am running a conference, getting this going. But the work that you've put in years and years until you get to this place, that's important.
Yeah. And going off of that too, it's like when you become an entrepreneur, you draw on every single experience you have in your life, no matter how
good
small
or bad.
it is, good or bad. So for my advice, you guys are hustling your career right now. You don't know where you're going, keep hustling.
Right.
Right? Because you're going to need this experience somehow, some way. It just comes in the randomest places. Like, oh, I'm kind of glad I went through that experience. Now I know what to do.
Right.
And sometimes I feel when you run into the obstacles or the challenges, that drives you, or that kind of gives you that insight, like, wait a minute, maybe there's something else I should be doing, but this is just coming into my life for a reason.
Exactly.
Right?
Agree.
Gosh.
I wholly agree.
We're learning a lot. I mean, and this is what the show is all about, right? Getting entrepreneurs to kind of talk about what they've learned, challenges they've gone through, and what you can offer. So let's get to that, because Sean asked me some tough questions when I came on the show, talking about, he asked the tough questions. I think I'm a lot easier when I interview people. But anyways, so, when you talk about what you've gone through, and I think people can really learn from this, what are some of the big challenges you've got, and how you kind of got over that, and what you learned from it?
Before starting this network, I had very little experience in business. Well, besides my side hustle, right? But let's go step back a bit too. My side hustle was flipping houses in the Bay, right? And I got into it by accident because I moved to the Bay and I was like, wow, I make 6 figures, but I have 6 roommates. So that got me like learning to like network and break out my zone and like not fall into this stereotypical engineering mode where it's like you're quiet, you don't talk that much. So when I started a community, it was a huge awakening for me, right? Because I took the time to learn about almost like the history erasure of Asian Americans in U.S. history. I started to understand things from different perspective, right? And I need to become more aware of what I say and how I view things and what I do, right? Because with the Asian diaspora, it's so many nuances that needs to be worked on, right? There's it's not only just like a Asian representation problem, but like an East Asian representation problem,
right.
South Asian, women, other adoptees community, and it's like, okay, like how can it be more inclusive of everyone, right? So it's not just like starting a company where it's like your goal is profit, right?
Got you.
This is starting something that's more of a movement, right? Where everything we do gets back to building what we want to do. And that's been so hard because you get so many different opinions in your ears, so many emotions that comes towards your direction. And I'm really happy that overall the community is very positive, but there are times where people reach out and really attack me, right?
What's their main attack? What are they saying that you're not doing right by the Asian American community?
They just feel like I don't do enough, right? And one of the bigger things was probably the rising Asian crime.
Oh, okay.
They were like, what is Asian Hustle Network going to do about it? And that really challenged me to push myself to think outside the box.
Right.
Because I know any political matter will divide the community in Asian Hustle Network. So I started HateIsAVirus as a way for me to become more outspoken, more political. This is more, this is the version that you guys see today is more me.
Right.
Before I was very like polite and everything, but more I'm like, hey, we gotta be a little mean, in order to take the community and push them forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a learning experience. It's been a learning experience, I'm sure, for you as well, right? Going through this process.
It is. Yeah. I learned to be more myself, right? And I learned to like, hey, I'm also falling into the mode of like overly nice and overly polite. I need to become more loud.
Right.
I need to take on space. I need to push harder for what I feel is right. Right. But don't let it get into the point of arrogance. Always listen to people. Always take feedback and incorporate that.
That's great advice, for anyone starting a business or starting any kind of venture, is to just find that balance, right? Because you can't be perfect, but you can be, just a blend of that hard work, but also someone who speaks out and speak out for yourself.
Speak out for yourself, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I know that this conference that's coming up, what's been the hardest part for you? Just getting this together, right? Getting everybody in place and making sure that you carry something that people are paying money to go see, that they get the most value out of it.
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head, right? It's a lot of moving parts, a lot more than I thought, right? And I want it to be very special for the community, and I want it to be everlasting. I want to have this every single year now until forever,
Most definitely.
right? And on top of that, I want to see other groups do this too. I realize that we can't not do this alone. Like we need other communities to push forward for other Asian conferences around the world, right? That's the only way we're going to make a difference. And I want to use this as a foundation for future entrepreneurs, future people, future kids, future generation to build on top of, right? That's my goal for this event.
Yeah. I mean, what do you feel like, from listening from Bryan's story, Sean, that we can really bring out, especially for entrepreneurs, people looking for, that inspiration?
The inspiration. What is something? So let's ask this. Can you think of a time that you planned something and it didn't go accordingly? Like, how did you make that work?
That was a tough question you gave me.
Yeah,
I remember.
That was a tough one.
Oh man.
Yeah.
A lot of things, right? Yeah, I don't know where to start.
Things don't turn out. I know.
Hey,
that's a tough question.
The tough question I asked.
But yeah, but there's value in that because so many people run into so many problems starting a business.
Man.
Negotiating for a salary increase. So many things that don't go the way that you expect, but you have to find a way to pivot, right, and make it work. I'm sure you've gone through many of those.
We had a lot of pivots for the organization. I think originally we wanted just to be, events,
right?
Facebook group, just host events around the world, let people borrow our brand to host more events. But obviously COVID happened and that didn't go as planned. And now we find ourselves in a huge financial situation where it's like, how do we support ourselves? Right? Because people will always reach out and be like, hey, can you guys do this? Can you guys do that? But at the end of the day, it's like, if you can't feed yourself and the team, there's not going to be this community anymore.
Right.
And that put us in a huge drawing board of how do we generate revenue? And I feel like for most businesses, you kind of have a clear-cut idea of how to generate revenue. For a community, it's like, how do you generate revenue without screwing up your mission?
Right.
That is interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, because there's that clear transactional thing that you're giving. Yeah. You're giving inspiration, you're giving stories, right? You're giving this platform, but how do you generate revenue? And I think that's a question a lot of people are asking with what they're trying to do these days.
Yeah. So we kind of position ourselves more as an influencer type of model, where we work with agencies, we work with brands, and they want to target the Asian community.
Yeah.
Right. We kind of walk through the list of how we generate revenue too. It's kind of hilarious to think about. We generate revenue through sponsorships. Obviously, work with a lot of agencies and brands. We would act as a middleman.
Okay.
So some of these big companies reach out to us and be, hey, can you give me 5 leaders in your community and we'll pay you money for it.
Oh, wow.
Right. And it's just
that's an interesting concept.
That is a nice concept.
So we found ourselves as
so you're the connector.
The super connector.
Super connector.
I like that.
Yeah. Super connector.
And it's funny too, because I learned from real estate how important email addresses were in order for my business, right? My newsletters.
Oh, okay.
So since day one of Asian Hustle Network, we started collecting emails and location and profession. So as a result, we have over 200,000 emails.
Oh,
now.
Goodness, sir.
Yeah.
200
and still growing. So that's the tip, is to keep in touch and keep those relationships growing, right?
Yeah, because we have those relationships, we have those connections, we have those demographics and data where it's like, if we want to start a new project, we can easily find someone in that niche, right?
I like that.
Yeah, a lot of people can learn from that.
Yeah, they could. They really could. So I suggest, man, please, if you're not tapped into Asian Hustle Network, please tap in their conferences this weekend. Please make sure you tap in. And he's been, thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And for people to get in touch with you, how do they find you? Where are you located?
Yeah, you mainly just Google Asian Hustle Network. It comes up on everything. All our social media accounts are Asian Hustle Network. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Join our Facebook community, actually.
Yeah, drop all the handles. Tell everybody the handles. Tell them where they can find you, sir.
Yeah, you just Google Asian Hustle Network. You can find me at Bryan Pham on all cross social media platforms.
I think it's time for our happy hour. Let's wrap up the show.
It's time for the happy hour, ladies and gentlemen. Patranya, do you have something for our guests?
We do.
Whoa.
I come bearing gifts today.
We come bearing gifts.
Here you go, Bryan.
On behalf of the Business Information Buffet podcast, also known as the BIB podcast, where everybody eats, this is for you.
Whoa, I love this.
Woo. Yes, sir.
I hope yellow is your color.
I like bright colors. Oh, I can't wear this right now.
There we go. That's awesome. Looks great.
It looks great on you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. And thank you for coming in. And, we have a last question for all our guests, usually during happy hour.
Yes, we
so
do.
we got to focus on the positive, right? Remember when we were talking to me, like what makes my brand kind of stand out? I think it's positivity.
Yeah.
So we want to think about what's going well, what's going great for you right now.
How supportive you guys are in the community to make this happen.
Man, come on now. Shout out to the community.
And
We can't do it without each other,
We
right?
can't.
We
No,
have
we
to
can't.
support each other.
You guys continuously motivate me every day, push me, inspire me, and it's weird because like I have a lot of downtime, like down moments in the last few weeks, and I got an email that says, "Thank you for creating Asian Hustle Network.
Wow.
Thank you for what you do." And it's almost at the right moment every single time too, where I'm just like, why am I doing all this? This is hard, right? I can have a much easier life, chilling.
Yeah.
But the community keeps me grounded, keeps me motivated, and always gives me a lot of new ideas on how to improve myself and everything that we do. So highly appreciate that.
Well, congratulations on all you've done and for this conference. I know it's going to be great. And so great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you guys.
No, thank you for coming on to the show. It's been a pleasure having you and Miss Patranya. I had a phenomenal time being a guest, being our guest host, and me just letting you
just
lead
hanging out. It's a party.
It was a party today.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out today. We want a huge shout out to Asian Hustle Network. Huge shout out to Patranya. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our show. This is the Business Information Buffet Podcast, also known as the BIB Podcast, where everybody eats. I am your host, Sean Tory, with our guest host,
Patranya Bhoolsuwan.
Patranya! And ladies and gentlemen, we're gone. We'll have a great time. We'll catch you next time.